Hello everyone. Now I will discuss about my research entitled High School Student Perspective of Programming, Plagiarism and Collusion. I'm Oscar Karnalim and I'm with Robby from Faculty of Information Technology, Maranatha Christian University, Indonesia. First of all is the background. So in programming courses, plagiarism and collusion are two common forms of misconduct. They are essentially about reusing one's code without proper acknowledgement. Exclusive to collusion, the original author is aware about the matter, but somewhat allows it to happen. A number of strategies have been developed to mitigate programming plagiarism and collusion. On most occasions, students are informed about academic integrity at the beginning of the course or when the assessment is issued. Upon the submission deadline, similarities across student submissions are checked with automated tools, and students with suspected submissions are then penalized according to the course policies. So while informing students about academic integrity, it is important for us to focus on what students might misinterpret. They can vary across regions and they are affected by cultural and geographical factors. Several studies about student perspective on programming plagiarism and collusion have been conducted in China, Cyprus, Indonesia, Slovenia, and UK. However, these studies might be less relevant for instructors teaching introductory programming courses. Why? Because most of the students just graduated from high school. So as a contribution, this paper presents a survey summarizing the perspective of high school students about programming, plagiarism, and collusion. To ensure familiarity with programming, we conducted a 2-hour on-site game programming session. And this is our method. First, we familiarize students with the concept of programming. And after that, we ask them to complete the survey. And after that, we analyze the survey result. The first step, familiarizing students with the concept of programming. So we conducted a 2-hour on-site game programming session where students were taught to develop a 2D platformer game where a pig can move around and collect apples with Construct 3. Why we choose Construct 3? Because it can run on an internet browser without the need to install it locally. So it can be easier for the students. And after the lecture, students were given an assessment to develop similar games, but with different contexts. So they can use different sprites, different backgrounds, and maybe different mechanisms. The assessment should be completed in groups of 3 to 5 students. And for each class, a group with the most creative work will be selected for prizes. And the second stage is asking the students to complete the survey. Survey questions were adapted from another study, but they were intentionally paraphrased for high school students. For example, we replace all code with work because work is like more common for the students. And you can see the questions here in the table and the expected answer. So per questions, students were expected to respond whether the scenario is allowed in their academic environment. They can also respond with do not know if they were uncertain about the answer. Since there is no firm consensus about the scenarios, the expected answers were taken verbatim from other studies. So from these studies, the expected answers were from consensus among several higher education instructors. The third step is analyzing the results. So the responses were summarized based on the expected answers, and then we calculated how many responses were the same as the expected ones. The results were then analyzed, and any possible reasons were reported. And this is our study setting. So the survey was conducted in September 2022 at one Indonesian high school. We have 7 classes of grade 10 students and 7 classes of grade 11 students. In total, we have 214 of 468 participating students. 116 of them are grade 10 students and 98 are grade 11 students. So now we will see about student uncertainties in responding to the survey. So we can say that students were quite aware of given scenarios. Why? Because most of them are certain about their responses. They prefer to choose either agree or disagree instead of do not know. Key 11, Key 3, and Key 10 were three scenarios with the highest uncertainty degree. So, as a result, higher education instructors teaching introductory programming courses are expected to explicitly inform students about these three scenarios. Key 11 is about adding features a student saw from their friend's work. So although replicating features without acknowledgement seems a little unethical, it is quite common in industry. Further, being aware of several features does not entail the ability to replicate the features. Key O3 is about reusing one's work submitted for previous assessment without acknowledgement. It is quite similar with self-plagiarism. While the act does not directly harm other people, it is unfair for other students who exclusively submit a work to an assessment. Key 10 is about asking a friend to fix the work. While fixing issues in a work usually entails a little contribution to the whole submission, it is still unacceptable for individual assessments. Why? Because the students does not write the entire work for themselves. Now we move to student awareness. So high school students were somewhat aware of programming plagiarism and collusion because in average, they could correctly respond to 8.8 of 11 scenarios. There is still a need to inform students about the whole set of scenarios, although of course, some of them can be more detailed. So in here, we can see that the highest proportion is like from key O2, and then followed by key O1, and then key O4. While the lowest proportion is like on key 11 and key O8. We will see one by one. So the first two, key O1 and key O2, most students agreed that they are academic misconduct. Key O1 is about purchasing a college work to incorporate into their own work. And key O2 is about paying a college to complete the assessment and submitting it as their own work. Perhaps it is because both involve the use of money. Key O3 is about self-plagiarism. So it was correctly responded by 59% of the students. Some students thought that the act is still acceptable. So we need to inform them that it is unfair for students who submit unique work for each assessment. Key O4 is about incorporating a college's work without their permission, which we can say plagiarism. This is considered as academic misconduct by most students, 87%. It is expected to ask permission while using one's work and acknowledge the reuse. So higher education instructors teaching introductory programming courses are expected to only explain this in general because most of them are already aware. Key 05 is about borrowing a college work and changing it so that it looks quite different. It was correctly responded by 2/3 of the students. They might be aware that the act is not acceptable because it involved disguising a college work. For Key 06, it is about borrowing an early draft of a college work and then developing it into one's own. Many students were aware about the matter. Although it is only early draft, it is not originally created by the student. It is important to either not to use it or to acknowledge the reuse. Key 07 is about discussing with a college how to complete an assessment, then developing the solution independently. Many students agree that the act is allowed. Although the solutions are based on the discussions, the solutions are still developed by the student themselves. And discussing a way to complete a task does not necessarily mean the ability to develop the solution. QA8 is about discussing the details of one work with another students while working on it. More than half of the students disagree with it. They might be concerned with the level of detail. It is actually acceptable to have detailed discussion so long as the discussion is still at conceptual level. QO9 is about asking a college about advice to fix the work. The X is allowed since the students still need to understand given advice and incorporate that to their own work. For a fifth of the students, 80%, were aware that the act is allowed. Q10 is about asking a college to fix the work. So while the act is somewhat similar to that of QO9, the resulting work is not entirely written by the students, and thus it is not allowed. Only around half of the students correctly responded to the question, sorry. Students might think that the act is allowed since the fix does not contribute much to the work, but it is not actually. Key 11 is about adding features you saw from your friend's work, and according to our perspective, it is acceptable. It is allowed because to replicate features, a student needs to think about how to implement it by themselves. Only 35% of the students consider the scenario to be allowed. So, as the conclusions, high school students were quite aware about programming plagiarism and collusion upon being introduced to game programming. Higher education instructors teaching introductory programming courses need to explicitly inform students about replicating features, having detailed discussions, and asking advice. There is also a need to inform students about self-plagiarism, as there is a considerable degree of uncertainty among students' responses. And we have a number of limitations that entail the future work. First, the survey was conducted on a private high school in Indonesia. So replication studies with different schools, especially those from different provinces, might be necessary. And then programming concept was introduced via a 2-hour on-site game programming session with Construct 3. Different programming sessions might affect the findings. Student perspective was captured via closed-ended questions, and it thus limited the analysis. Adding several open-ended questions in the survey could provide richer and deeper analysis. Okay, that's all. Thank you. If you have further inquiries, you can contact me via email.